Hi, everyone. Welcome to your True Disabled Story. My name is Nico, and I use he, him pronouns. I'm a white man with parted blonde hair, large blue and brown spectacles, and a dark shirt underneath a gold zip up hoodie. I also have a black headset around my head, and I'm seated inside against a bookcase and a purple wall. This is my home office. Like roughly 25% of Americans and 17% of Philadelphians, I'm disabled. And whether we look locally, nationally, or globally, disability communities are full of dynamic, diverse, and frankly delightful people with their own stories to tell. All we have to do is listen. Today, I'm honored to be chatting with Micah, who will tell us all about his disabled story. Micah, thank you for joining me. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing very well. Thank you. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Micah, what was your path to diagnosis like? Was this like a surprise, or something that kind of hit you out of the blue, or was this something that maybe on the other end you were actively pursuing? So, paint that picture
Yeah,
for us.
sure. Absolutely. So, just to give you the context, I remember as probably as young as elementary school, when I remember specifically being in special education classroom. So I remember being isolated, from the general classes that were in my school. And I would always kind of wonder, why is that? I really don't know, like, why I'm in these special education courses. And so throughout mostly like elementary school and early middle school, I remember, I was taken out for middle school, I was taken out for certain subjects and for certain criteria. And yeah, and just needing, I guess, some of that extra support, but it was never told, okay, what the reason was for that. So moving into high school, that's where things start to open up a little bit. And I had noticed as a young kid that, some of these tendencies that I had, like, they were sort of a nuisance to other people. Sometimes whether that, sometimes if that's in my family or sometimes the way I behaved and moved, I don't know. Like, it just had this, I don't know. It was unorthodox. It was unorthodox. Let's put it that way. But anyway, back to high school. Um, High school was interesting in the way that I remember having conversations with people, and I would make small talk with people. And I remember there was this challenge I had, and I couldn't keep a conversation with people. I always had difficulty trying to figure out what to say next, or, oh my gosh, what do I say next in this conversation? What do I do? Like, what comes next? Like, I really don't know. And I remember feeling sometimes this sense of awkwardness in my conversations, and this was as early as freshman year. And I can remember a specific point, like a really big turning point for me. I remember I came home, midway through my freshman year of high school, and I remember coming into the door after I got home, um, and I remember telling my mom, I was like, "Mom, I think something's wrong with me." And I really didn't know what that was. I really didn't know what that entailed. It was just that something's different. Something's different about me. Like, is this normal to feel like you don't know what the script of what to say or how to communicate or socialize in certain social situations? That was a big question for me. And so, I was very grateful that my mom was able to be attentive to that. And what she did for me was she was able to get me the support that I needed. I went and got diagnostic testing done. It was it felt so long ago. Felt so long ago. This is like 2008 that I got this done, and so I remember going to remember getting the diagnostic testing done, and then when I met with the psychologist, and we were talking about the results, right? They had told me back then in 2008, right, that I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, and of course now that terminology is now outdated, and we use autism spectrum disorder now today. But back then it was like, what? So and I remember them saying, "Oh, it was a form of autism." And so I myself was very I myself was very surprised, like, hmm? But I was also very relieved too. Like there was something that can explain my experience in life, and I always like to think like even before the diagnosis that I was always autistic. I just didn't know the terminology to give it. And so I remember being able to have that language and to being able to now, okay, this is really good. But interesting in 2008, it's like where were the I couldn't find as many resources as I wanted to, and the way that autism was viewed back then was only, I don't know, it only focused on one level of autism, at least in my eyes. And so I didn't necessarily see representation all around. The representation, I should say, was very limited back then compared to what we have today, where we're now seeing more autistic activists who are speaking up for themselves rather than somebody else speaking up for them. And so it was very difficult to find those resources and those access points to how I could become, a better person. And so I remember in high school, it was all sort of new. It was all sort of new to me, the language and whatnot. I was sharing with people, and I think for me that was something definitely I would definitely take as a life lesson. It's like, yeah, like just being mindful of like where you share, how you share, because again 2008, not many people might know that language, and it was something that I had to learn time and time again. Like I'm someone who considers themselves a very transparent and honest person, because I want people to see me as I see myself. But I also have to recognize too that sometimes the rest of the world is not ready. But they need to get ready, right, in a sense that there needs to like our society, like differences make us who we are. Diversity makes us as a whole, makes us who we are. Like if we're all the same, right, it doesn't feel that way. And also too how differences can enhance our world. So I think I just thinking like looking at my diagnosis now and being able to have the access. I recognize like recognizing having the access and the privilege to be able to get diagnosed at such a young age. I was only 14 then. It was really life changing for me. But I also want to recognize too that diagnosis is not always accessible to folks, and that's something that I truly recognize. And so like for the you know and so for those, right, who might be self-diagnosed, they're just as valid as my formal diagnosis, as well.
Micah, thank you. I really love a part of what you said, and I think you could probably repurpose it into a podcast title, a book title. Just get ready, or they need to get ready. It's true. Um, as you've mentioned, even since you got your diagnosis, there have been huge strides made in the autism community, and I really appreciate you highlighting kind of what it was like then, to what it was like now, in what turns out to be, in the grand scheme of things, not very long at all. Fantastic, Micah. Thank you so much. That was really enlightening. I really appreciate it. So the second question, you kind of touched on it, in terms of what your condition how your condition showed up in school for you. But I want to give you kind of a wider canvas to paint on. What overall impact has your diagnosis had on your life? And that could be professionally, academically, socially, as you had mentioned.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really great question. So, um, I can definitely start from a more, I guess, from a more academic sense, because that's really where a lot of my time and energy was spent. So, from an academic standpoint, and specifically thinking a little bit about, I guess, even like high school, college, even grad school. So I would say like, so I would say in college, right? I remember getting accommodations in college, and most of those accommodations that I had were around testing. So I got like extra time on exams, or if I needed to turn in an assignment, I could turn an assignment a little bit later. That was um, also helpful as well. And I'm definitely grateful that I had those accommodations in place. So when I needed them, I could use them. And at first, when I had those accommodations, I tended not to use them because I felt like, oh, I feel like I'm cheating, or I feel like I'm getting an extra hand or an upper leg. But I remember at one point in college, I took this one class that I ended up not doing well in, and I never used my accommodations. So I was literally on par with everybody. So I took a test in exams in this classroom with everybody else on the same time clock as everybody else, and it was just like it was very like it was very stressful. But the next semester I retook that class, and I ended up using my accommodations. I advocated for myself, and I ended up taking the exam with our disability services office at my school. And so I ended up doing well on all the exams just for the fact of being able to have an isolated space where I could concentrate without anybody else around me, and also having the time take as much time as I needed on the exam. So I really appreciate, just from an academic sense, right, being able to have those accommodations present. And when it came to the academics itself, right, I was ultimately right. I was a very like I was a very hard and diligent worker, and I think being on the spectrum has really taught me a lot about what I possess and the strengths that I have. And so I think about myself when I was thinking about what I wanted to do as a career. And this can kind of tie into professionally too. And so I was thinking career wise, and I remember like I knew like from middle school that I had a very good knack for music. And so what a lot of people don't know about me is that I actually have perfect pitch. And so it's essentially the ability to be able to name an outside pitch without reference. So if you put on an everyday sound, right, I could probably name the pitch of it most likely. And so at that point, I saw that, hey, music would be something that might interest me, and so I ended up majoring in music when I was in college, and I enjoyed learning about music and being able to play music, and that was something that really got me going. And one thing I think that how it impacted me, because the way I looked at my diagnosis as a college student, is that I feel like at some points I didn't know the full extent to who I was. I didn't know what else I was capable of doing. And so I thought, oh, okay, music is going to be the only thing that I do. But I was a little bit ambivalent about what I was actually really going to do with music. And part of me had always thought, okay, if I really want to do something, what do I really want to do? And um, I'm very thankful, that I was able to get some leadership development while I was in college. So I ended up taking the Clifton Strengths Assessment, which is a really powerful tool. I really lean on a lot of those tools because they're very tangible, and they give me something tangible to look at, is to say, hey, these are things that you can you can look at, these are talents that you have, and then you can build those up. And I remember one of my talents, one of my top five talents is essentially being able to cultivate potential in others. And I was like, whoa. I was like, okay, so I need to be doing something that cultivates potential in others, that helps them to grow. And thankfully, I was able to have experiences as an orientation leader through my college. So I was involved with orientation, and that's where I found myself really shining. It's like, okay, I'm interacting with people, and believe it or not, as an autistic person, it's like, oh my goodness, right? I'm interacting with people. I'm a social person. I'm a social bird. I'm actually doing all of this, and so I ended up being able to flourish, being able to support other students. And that led me into kind of like the career that I have today, working in student affairs administration in higher education. And so that's something that I really, something that for me, I think it took some it was happenstance, but I think for me it helped realize that, okay, um, just because the diagnosis says you can do, like the diagnosis says, quote unquote, you might have challenges and difficulties with this, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are tied down. And when I thought about the spectrum as a college student, it was very different to how I think about it now. So some areas might be more amplified than others. And so I recognize that, okay, so it sounds like this social aspect of being on the spectrum is a little bit more amplified in some cases. And so I use that now in my current profession, as a student affairs educator, and working on a college campus with students and with other colleagues to really help better and support my current institution. And so I'm really grateful for just where I am at, and even thinking too, just right about even going to like pursuing an advanced degree was something that I never even thought about. Just like being able to being able to attend grad school, something that I just never really thought about. So I'm um, really grateful just being able to know. Like, I think one thing about me is that when I know I want something, I will go and get it. Like, if I'm so certain about something, I will go and get it. Um, Personally, and then just thinking personally too, just um how I've had to, like, the ways I've had to navigate the ways I had to navigate relationships, um friendships, identity. It's all like, there's been a lot of interesting things that I've just found out about myself. So I think definitely being on the spectrum has helped me like learn more about sort of like the different aspects of my identity that were blossoming after college. And so I kind of like learned a little bit. So I think like just one thing for me just recently is just learning more about being queer. And so for me, that's something that I didn't know, like something I just kind of like wandered through the world. Just, hey, I didn't know that I was queer for for most of my life. And so now that I kind of like recognize that, it's like, oh, okay, wow. And recognizing and seeing all the research that's done on that's there, and the correlation between being neurodivergent and also queer. And so that's something that I also recognize too. It's like, oh, the two go hand in hand. And that's allowed me to being able to connect with like-minded people, to connect with community too, and then also being able to think about how we go about just life itself. Because I think a lot of times we need to follow that there everybody needs to follow this script, especially with relationships. And the beautiful thing is that's really helped like liberate my thought process is that there are different ways by which we can go about relationships. We don't have to subscribe to to one model. There are various ways of going about relationships, and that's something that I have begun to explore and really ask those deeper questions about what I really want in life because not everybody wants the quote unquote American dream. Um, and I think, and honestly, I would even consider, hey, have you like to question question the American dream and ask ourselves what is it that we truly want in life, um, and is the American dream it?
Fair question. Micah, thank you so much. This was really comprehensive, and I really appreciate the forethought and directness with which you made your answers. So I understand that this diagnosis process took a long time for you, and it opened up considerations and new ways of seeing yourself that maybe you weren't thinking of before. Um, now that you know everything, right? Looking back, what advice would you give people with your diagnosis, or if you could go back in your own personal timeline, what advice would you give 2008 Micah, who was just beginning this diagnosis journey?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think a couple of things come to mind. It's I think number one, and I mentioned it earlier. It's that number one, it's that um, not everybody has to know about your diagnosis. And I think it also comes with the fact like being mindful of who you share with because I remember, and this was like after I had graduated college, I had actually shared with a family member of mine, and lo and behold, it didn't go well, because I thought, oh, they'll know about it, and it'll all be fine, and it didn't go well, and it didn't go well for me, and so I recognized, okay, this is somebody that I would not be able to trust, that I know I can't trust. So it's being mindful of who you share with and recognizing who you can trust, right? Who is actually going to listen to you and appreciate you for who you are. Um, and I think too, not infantilize you. Yes, not infantilize you. Number two, I would also say is be aware of some of the ableism, low key ableism that occurs. As a college student, I recognize so many. I didn't know back then, but now I recognize so many times where so many ableist phrases were used at me. So if I shared with somebody that, hey, I'm autistic, one thing that I would get is that you don't look autistic, or oh, my so and so has autism. So it deflects off of me and then makes it about the other person. And so definitely recognizing like where those instances of ableism are occurring, and addressing it. Um, because as a college student, I didn't know what those phrases were, but now I do. And I'm more cognizant of it. And I would also say too, especially in the autism community, it can be very easy for people to infantilize us because autism has had this emphasis on kids, but now we're starting to see more of a shift towards adults. And there's still this infantilizing notion or motion to want to treat us like we're little kids, or like we're babies, and we're adults. So treat us as such, right? Treat us as, or treat us where we are, whomever you are, right? Whether you're older, whether you're younger. So treat us where we are, right? Just just don't infantilize us, right? That's just really the big thing. Um, and then let's see here. And then I would also too, and then also too, with anybody with my diagnosis, I'm very grateful now that it's gotten a lot better too. We have online tools, we have in-person tools, but definitely get connected with a good with a good community, with a community that you would feel comfortable going back to time and time again. I know that for me, that was really difficult in college. That was difficult for me. That was difficult for me to find, and of course, I didn't have the tools to be able to, oh, maybe create my own organization back then. That's what I would have done, right, if I had known. But definitely find those areas, those spaces, those communities, wherever you might be. And if you don't have a community, you can create one. Something that I did actually, something that I did actually in my actually in my per- in in my current job right now. So I recognize too that there were a lot of there are different affinity groups, and so I recognized that there were all these different affinity groups based off of different identities, but one area that was missing was disability, and I was like, why isn't disability on this list? If my institution claims to be the most diverse institution in the state, then why isn't disability a part of this? So I took the steps, and I ended up creating a affinity group surrounding disability, and we've had numerous faculty and staff who are joining. We've had opportunities to connect with local with local organizations around different initiatives, and even more so, right, within higher education too, right, there's opportunities, right, to really for opportunities to support students and thinking about their needs as well. So as far so part of me is an advocate in a way a lot of times, and so that's also a really another point that I'll also make too. But I think for me, just being able to, right, create those communities, and really build those communities if there already isn't one already, and if there is one that you might know, fantastic. So definitely like really lean in on getting connected, because believe it or not, disability has a culture, and even autism, right? Autism has a culture to it. There are things that we do that the rest of the world doesn't do, and that's something that we're and that's something to be recognized, is that fact of disability culture, which is a professional interest of mine. And then lastly, what I'll share about advice is self-advocacy. So I think one of the big things about especially when it comes to being autistic is that I sometimes didn't know what my needs were at times. And so it was sometimes challenging to like, "Hmm, I don't know what my needs are if I haven't experienced them." But now I'm giving voice to them, and I'm giving words to them to know that, okay, these are my access needs, or this is what I want, or this is what I need in this moment in time. And so something that I've and so something that I have and so something too, for someone who has a diagnosis too, is that when it comes to recognizing your needs, you don't have to share with somebody your diagnosis. You can just share, like the one thing I've learned is that I have challenges in this area, and these are my needs. So, for instance, right, for me, one of the things for me, one example is I have challenges with overhead fluorescent lighting at work. And for me, it would be really helpful to have either a dim light that would either have a floor lamp, right, that would give me the um, would help some of the headache, some of the headaches that I might that I might have during the day. So that's like just one of many examples. So it's really just emphasizing the challenge and then asking for and then what accommodation really needs to come forth. Like that's really just the two big keys to self advocacy in my mind. So um, yeah.
That was fantastic, Micah. Thank you. You had lots of advice to share, and I really appreciate it. My last question is one that I ask everybody, regardless of project. Where can people find you online? This is your chance, Micah, to step up on your soapbox, to promote yourself, be your own cheerleader. If you have like a recent win that you want to mention and pat yourself on the back, go ahead. You've earned it. Let's hear it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, as far as where people can find me online, they can find me on LinkedIn. My name's Micah Hodges. Micah Hodges, so they can find me that way. I'm also on Instagram as well, just kind of like as a couple of months recently. So I kind of made my return to Instagram, and people can find my name again, Micah Hodges, or my tag, the Hodgepodge, and the number 6. So the Hodgepodge 6.
All right.
Yeah. And as far as like just one recent win in my life, so actually, so at work, at work, we have like annual HR human resources awards that are given, and so I definitely want to give myself a pat on the back because one of the awards that I won, it was called the Nancy Murphy Mason Spirit Award, and so this was an award really that's given to a recipient, right, who embodies, right, the spirit of the institution. And so for me, it was kind of a surprise that I got this award, and for me, one of the big things that I always just remember is just like it, well, I think about just being able to come in to work every single day, being able to show people who I am, work hard, just do the work, but also really too to have fun as well. Because I'm doing a lot right now, and I think like just being able to see that award just helps me recognize that people are seeing what I'm doing and that it's making an impact, hopefully on them and for the students that I serve.
Micah, congratulations on winning that award, and thank you for all the support you give to your students and fellow staff. That's really fantastic. As we close here, I want to thank you again for your time. I thought that your answers to my questions were comprehensive and are a really good jumping point for anybody who might be pursuing a autism spectrum diagnosis themselves. Thank you again, Micah. I really appreciate it.